And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, where I'm joined now by Scott Carter, the CEO of Lear Capital. Scott is absolutely a leading voice on precious metals. He's also a leading advocate for acquiring gold and silver as a hedge against collapsing currencies. Now, I hardly know where to start, Scott. This is a fascinating time for what you do for a living. I've been watching the gold market, and I'm seeing hesitancy basically over the past month. Yeah, it's almost like they're waiting to see what the Federal Reserve is going to do, and nobody knows where to go until then. Are you finding this to be the case?
That is the case, although in July, Rick, something changed, and fear and risk entered the market, and actually our business picked up quite a bit. So I think there's a sense that the Fed is stuck and that the economy is really out in front of its skis, as they say.
Right.
So therefore, individuals are starting to buy a little bit of gold and silver to diversify their portfolio.
Isn't this the way it typically goes when people get worried about the stock market, when people get worried about the value of the dollar, they tend to escape into precious metals in order for a safe harbor. Is that true?
That's true. Bonds, cash, precious metals, those are safe harbor investments. And look, we've had a great run in the stock market for the last 7 years, but we're at 16,000 and it used to be at 7,500. Isn't it time to diversify your portfolio a little bit? Most investors don't do it. They try to top tick the market, they miss it, and they take a huge hit when the market corrects.
And you know, I would think that a conservative investor, and hopefully most people are long-term conservative investors, I know in the younger household that's how we do it, that they are diversified and that they are holding hedges against, look, as you point out, this is a difficult time for the stock market. We've seen it over the past couple weeks, just bouncing everywhere, and we really don't know where this is all going. If you have gold in your portfolio, you're probably, and you tell me, you're the expert, you're probably in much better shape to weather a crash, if that should be what comes around.
Well, that's exactly the case. Over the last 15 years, if you had just 20% gold and silver in your portfolio overall would be 30% higher than if you didn't own it. Yeah. So it's been a great diversification, but very few people own it. Less than 2% of portfolios own gold and silver.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a not often discussed asset. People are in love with the stock market. They think they're diversified if they buy Apple and diversify into Google. That's really not diversification.
Right.
So individuals usually own their home and they own stocks. If they really considered the whole play on economics, they would have some gold and silver in their portfolio.
Is there a way for the consumer who's listening to you right now and says, you know, that actually makes some sense? Is there a way for them to buy gold and silver as an asset without having to actually buy the bars of gold and silver?
Yes, you can. If you want exposure to gold and silver, you can buy the GLD, which is a security. But you're not really getting physical gold and silver.
So you prefer something I can actually touch with my hand?
Well, some investors do. If some people, it's like buying a REIT versus buying the real property. Some people just like the exposure to real estate. Other people want to own the building on the corner.
Right.
Gold's the same way. It's the same thing. So our investors, our clients, they want the actual gold and they want to put it in their safety deposit box, or they want to put it in their safe at home.
What do you recommend, again, to the conservative investor? And I think that's really what most of our audience, it's the way they do it.
Right.
What percentage of their portfolio is wise to have in a precious metal?
One, you should look at a long-term investment, and you should have between 5, if you just want a little bit, 5%, up to a maximum of 15%. I mean, it's not a bet the ranch strategy.
Right.
This is a contra asset. You should have stocks, you should have some cash, you should have real estate, you should have bonds, but you should also have some precious metals. There is no better asset that protects you against a declining dollar, declining world currencies.
Right.
Gold and silver has done that. It's been there for 5,000 years.
All right, so let's look at this the other way. Let's say the dollar right now seems to be incredibly solid. It's just, the way the world's shaking out, I'm not sure that's a big negative. But what happens if the stock market doesn't fall apart and you've made the investment in gold? It doesn't lose as much value, does it? In other words, when the stock market goes, it goes.
Right.
Gold tends not to do that, am I right?
That's correct. I mean, gold has had a pretty bad last 3 years. It's down 30%. But if you think about that in comparison to the stock market, you could lose 50, 60% of the value in the stock market.
In a couple of days.
In a couple of days, exactly. So gold is just not a well understood investment. And if it were well understood, individuals, investors, they would see the value of it. But by the way, if the stock market goes up, gold has done well in inflationary times. When your dollar is declining.
Well, that's the other part. I mean, here we're waiting to hear what the Fed has to say. A lot of people are betting that they are going to raise interest rates, and that now starts to bring inflation into the mix. You do better with gold and silver during inflationary times, correct?
That's correct. When the dollar is declining in value, you're going to see gold and silver go up. I don't think the Fed, if they raise rates, it'll be 25 basis points. I don't think they're going to do it.
Scott, they're kicking me off for the segments. I so appreciate talking to you. I always learn something when you're hanging out here. So I hope you'll come back soon.
I will. Thanks, Rick.
Scott Carter. I made him Scott Lear. His company is Lear Capital. Again, Scott Carter, CEO of Lear Capital. Thanks so much for coming on. As I said, you're always welcome. To learn more about precious metals and Lear Capital, you want to be sure to go to learcapital.com. And we want to ask you, do you think gold is going to be a stable investment moving forward? Let us know by going to newsmaxtv.com/comments. Coming up next, we're going to read some of your viewer comments, and that's always interesting. Make sure you don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.